really good leaders today, and all of you in this room are really great leaders just by being here and wanting to be on the cutting, relevant edge of all of this. But really good leaders today spend a lot of time thinking about how do I organize and tag and help the flow of knowledge in my organization so that the right people on my team have the tools that they need and the information and the accuracy when they need it, how they need it, so that they can better serve the customer. I think it was Lou Platt about 15 years ago said a quote that's sort of started a whole knowledge management movement. If HP only knew what HP knew. And I think the opportunity for the leaders that really understand what social businesses feel like on the inside. It's actually not just about organizing the information and facilitating the flow. It's about tapping into understanding the diversity, the possibilities, the expertise that exists everywhere in your organization, and what it is that you can create that doesn't exist today. So it's one thing to organize what is. It's another thing to start being able to predict things that you wouldn't have been able to predict because you're breaking down the silos and tapping into the collective wisdom. So I think that's kind of neat. The third value proposition, and we heard probably this the most in the past couple of days, but this whole idea of be where your customers are. We know that the buying journey is changing. We know that people have multiple digital touch points at different points of their journey. How are we organizing ourselves on the inside to be able to meet our customers where they're hanging out, where they're learning, where they're debating, where they're complaining, where they're researching? Think of our own buying behavior. There's a shipping company called Maersk, really big shipping company, and one of the things that I really love about their philosophy with their sales leaders is they think of each one of their sales leaders as thought leaders. That's pretty cool. I'm not just a sales rep. I am a thought leader. I am a thought leader creating content and forwarding knowledge and growing knowledge, not just about Maersk, but about my industry. What would it look like to have a sales team full of people who were thought leaders, not just about your company, but about the industry? Jeffrey talked about this morning. Other people talked about it yesterday, this whole foundation of trust. In a trust economy, who do we trust? We trust people who help us grow, who help us learn, who help us access knowledge, who help us build relationships. What would it look like for us to think differently and be where our customers are? And fourth, this whole idea of speed and agility, and Jeffrey talked about this morning, this acronym FAST. If social media and sort of our buying journey, if maybe there's an opportunity more on the front end of the prospecting and the researching and the building of the relationship and the identifying prospects, maybe that's where it's best used. But how are we becoming more agile? Because the digital IQ of our sales force and how our processes and our people and our technology on the back end of the firewall, behind the firewall, is allowing us to be more agile. So if I'm John and I work in the web conferencing vertical, for example, and maybe I attended Matt's course or Matt's session yesterday, and one of the things on my 100 things on my to-do list that Matt has, the most productive human being I think I've met, is to be checking my keywords and my alerts for certain things that make sense in my business. And so maybe I'm looking for keywords around web conferencing, and I see a tweet, something about my web conferencing sucks. And I'm able to click on that link, and I'm able to see it's a corporate account, and I'm able to find the phone number, and I pick up the phone. And other than amazement on the other side, and maybe a little bit of shock that someone was paying attention and listening, wouldn't it be interesting if that all of a sudden got me a different kind of conversation? So what is that sales efficiency? And so with those four business value, those value propositions, I want you to think about those when you go back to your teams and when people ask you, what did I learn in the past 2 days? What do I know differently now that I didn't know yesterday? All of that, if it stays in your head, is no good. What are the kinds of conversations you're going to have with the people at your boardroom table, people in your office, people virtually, that are going to have further those conversations? So I wanted to, at this point, I wanted to introduce you for the first time, and actually no one has seen this before because this is brand new. This is launching today, literally. is a methodology which comes from experience. It's not theory, it comes from experience, and it's a collaboration from Enterprise Strategies and an organization out of the UK called Stop Think Social. And it's really an experiential kind of process that whether you're a small team or a big organization, this is the methodology, if you follow the methodology, that is going to help you transform into becoming a more social business. This isn't about doing more social. This is about becoming more social. So I wanted to share that with you. The first step in the methodology is culture. So just by a show of hands, has anybody ever been on the receiving end of some kind of failed launch initiative or change management initiative in your organization? Something that kind of got launched? Anybody? Only one? Okay, that's more like it. Anybody who's ever had a corporate office and remote satellites, anybody who's had HR come in, anybody who's had, you can insert department that you like, HR, finance, marketing, and all the rest. And that feeling of, they don't know my business, they don't know how this works, this is great in an office, but this doesn't feel right. One of the things that people miss so often is understanding that there is no one magic bullet. If you don't get a clear understanding of what you're starting from the culture of your workplace, and we talked so much about culture in the past 2 days, if you're going to change mindset, you have to understand what is making up the mindset in the first place. And so this whole idea of cultivating a change of sales mindset. If we're moving towards certain behaviors, then all of a sudden as leaders, if you're starting to see new behaviors, think about what we want to recognize and what we want to reward and what we want to not punish. So if you're moving to a place where you're saying, hey, you know what, I want you to tap into the collective wisdom and I want you to use our social intranet in a different way, and I want you to think differently. Well, if the guy comes back from a meeting with a client and the client had some concerns and the person goes to the social intranet and starts crowdsourcing maybe some ideas or some solutions or something along those effects, you can't reprimand them for not going, keeping you in the loop or going through the traditional methods. And so as you drive home tonight, start thinking about what would be the words that you would put to your culture. Andres talked yesterday about, competitive versus cooperative. Start thinking about those small little things. We talked about yesterday, do you force rank? Do you make that public? Do you make public only the people in your president's club? When we talked about with Jason, with the Ignite app, his theory was, well, maybe you only publish the 3 people above you and the 3 people below you. How do we reward? How do we have conversations? How do we come up with ideas in our team meetings? How do we cull ideas? How do we deal with feedback? How do we compensate? We talked yesterday about compensation. Are we compensating by geography, by team, by individual? Are we rewarding the behavior? Are we rewarding the results? All of those things are informing you as to what your culture currently is. And if you don't have a clear sense of that, then your initiatives are going to fail. We talked about hook. Jeffrey talked about this morning that maybe provocative sentence or the words that come out of your mouth that make someone lean in a little bit more. And by the way, that 8 seconds of human, sort of the attention span of humans that we're at right now, I don't know if you know this, but 7 seconds is the attention span of a goldfish. So somewhere between goldfish and human, we're dealing with a very small opportunity for us to be able to hook people into wanting to know more. Teresa talked about, where's Teresa? Teresa talked about it in her session as well. How do we identify the individuals and the sales team benefits? Well, the first thing is understanding what their pain points are. Try and experiment. Try and go back to your offices tomorrow and try and get super excited and say, you know what, I was at this phenomenal conference in the past couple of days and I've signed up for 5 new platforms, social technology platforms that we're all going to start using tomorrow because they're totally going to help our business. And then duck. But what if you went to the office tomorrow and sat your team down and had conversations that matter? Conversations like, hey, we were having a conversation in the past couple of days that the average salesperson is spending 2 to 3 hours a day looking for information or tools or data to be able to do a better job. Where are we at in that? What if we could reduce our email by 80%? What would we do with that time? How would we do differently? If starting from the place of understanding their pain points, which could be as varied as accuracy of data or speed, it could be something to do with life and work balance, it could be quotas, you don't know what those pain points are until you ask. And so once you know what those pain points are in the context of your culture, you're able to have better conversation around what is that hook, what is that emotional connection that's going to convince them that making the effort to move is going to make a difference. And the third thing is helping them visualize what success looks and feels like. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I think we miss doing as leaders is constantly reminding people what success looks and feels like. If you think of vision or visualize, it comes from the Latin word videre, which is to see. And often, however you do that, visually or on a whiteboard or however you're able to paint that picture, this is what it's going to feel like to work differently. This is what it's going to look like when we're not in all these silos. This is what it might feel like to be amping up our speed and going faster. Once I can see what that looks and feels like, I can kind of voice my objections, my fears, my anxieties around it, but you've got me in such a better place than if you just shove the change initiative down my throat. And then the third is assessment. The end result of what a social business looks and feels like, it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter the size of the company, there's certain characteristics that we can attribute to what a social business looks and feels like. What we can't do is paint a picture and say, everyone's starting from the same place. So having a methodology, and whether that's something that you do yourself or whether you bring in someone externally, enterprise strategies, one of the things, we spend a lot of time on the assessment phase. Because we believe that we understand where we're starting from, we know we want to move, and it actually doesn't matter if we're starting from here or on the social sort of business maturity model, if we're already here and we're just tweaking a few little things, that's okay. It's as equally okay to be starting at the 101 level. But we're going to use a different strategy and a different governance model to decide depending on where we're at. So that assessment piece is kind of critical. Imagine if you asked one of your reps to drive to a customer and kind of have a certain meeting, but you didn't assess their capabilities. Maybe they don't drive. Maybe they don't have a car. So once we have that assessment, once we understand where people are starting from, and understanding that when we do an assessment, we're not scoring them, we're not looking for the score doesn't matter, it's just to give us that baseline. Now all of a sudden, we're in a kind of neat place because we feel like we can start moving. And if you think, most of us operate in this ready, fire, aim mode. This may feel like it takes a bit longer, but depending on the culture of your organization and the organizational culture and a lot of these principles, is there reciprocal trust in the organization? Is there already dynamic collaboration? Is there authentic leadership? Do people understand the ultimate purpose of the organization? Do they understand the ultimate customer? If we're working from a starting point of that, all of this can happen pretty quickly. And so then, this is something that we do very easily from an external sales standpoint. We understand the value of putting a network around us. We understand the value of certain people. We understand the value that the way that we're going to get the contract with the CIO is actually their best bet, once we've done our research, is actually this chief architect officer, design officer in the IT side of things that's been with this guy for the past 3 companies that he's gotten fired for, and he's the guy that if we can actually convince to make the recommendations to move to here, that's going to hold a lot more weight. We do this naturally. We do it in our families. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they get that maybe there are certain times where they're going to influence dad more than mom to get what they want. We do it naturally. Inside your organizations, when you're trying to make change happen, who are the people in your network, and maybe they're not even in your network, in your organization, who are the influencers? Who are the early adopters? When something happens, who do people go to in the organization to get the real story? Who are the people who maybe are a little bit more of your heretics, who are a little bit more vocal, who aren't afraid to say what they think? Start identifying who those people are and then pull those in and start from the beginning and figure it out. What is, from their standpoint, their pain points? Why do they want to be involved in something like this? Why do they want to help transform? And then enable them with all the tools and the opportunities that you can to be part of the change process.